Hi there guys, you're probably excited for this week because I'm finally making the video that you have requested so much, and that is a video on the Mandela Effect. I'm going to tell you why I haven't done this video before. The reason I haven't done this video is because what I care about first and foremost is what is going to help humanity to expand, and this is not one of those subjects. This is one of those, tell me why all of these people remember one thing when reality is not that thing, when the most important thing that we need to be focused on as people right now and today is how we can live in a state of alignment so that we can bring our emotional systems into a space where we actually enjoy our lives, right? How we can have relationships in this time-space reality. That being said, for those of you that are interested in this and super fascinated and super confused, let's just dive into the subject, shall we? Mandela Effect. It is a term that was coined to describe any time our memories don't actually align with the reality that we are currently living in our time-space reality, or the history of our time-space reality. So that you can be on board with what we're talking about, I'm going to give you a few examples. Okay, so most people remember a painting of King Henry VIII with a turkey leg in his hand. Most people recall seeing this in history books, but literally this painting does not exist in any record. The Berenstain Bears, most people think it was spelled Bernstein. Most people remember Agatha Christie never being found after her disappearance, and yet she was. Most people remember Sinbad starring as a genie in a movie called Shazam. Apparently this movie never happened. C-3PO is remembered as being all gold when in fact he always had one silver leg. Carmen Sandiego, the cartoon character, is remembered as having a yellow trench coat long before the red one. The Fred Rogers sing-along song, right? It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. In fact, this is not the lyrics. The lyric is, it's a beautiful day in this neighborhood. Most people remember Martin Luther King being shot with a handgun at close range in front of a crowd. But in fact, he was shot by a sniper with a rifle while he was on the balcony of a hotel. People also collectively have different recollections of the locations of countries relative to one another. They remember movies before they're even released. They remember different dates and numbers for things. You get the picture. The reason this is called the Mandela Effect is because one of the most early recordings of this, let's call it collective consciousness occurrence, was with the death of Nelson Mandela. Most people swear that they know that he died in the 1980s. And they remember in grave detail the broadcasts that were being sent across media, the riots, what his wife said about his estate, like all this detail. However, he never did die that way. He never did die in prison. Key element there. He actually died in 2013 from a respiratory illness at home. People hate when explanations are complicated, when it's not possible to explain away something with one explanation. However, when it comes to the Mandela Effect, it is absolutely impossible to come up with one explanation for what is happening here. Basically, the Mandela Effect is a term that is used to describe any discrepancy between one's perception of what happened and the reality of what happened. There is no way for there to be a one-size-fits-all answer for that because of the nature of this universe and the human mind. But let's say that there are three major things which contribute, for the most part, to the majority of times where there is this discrepancy. The first contributor is media manipulation, government cover-up, and societal gaslighting. The second thing is collective false memory, based on the way that the human mind works in terms of perception. And the third thing are events that are the result of the human being's capacity to perceive beyond the limitation of their current reality and timeline. An example of the collective human mind creating false memory as a result of bias, association, misinformation, and imagination is the popular children's book and later TV series, The Berenstain Bears. In fact, it was always spelled Berenstain. However, let's just say there was a little bit of stuff going on at the time around the Jewish demographic. On top of this, people, mostly parents, they would pronounce the word Berenstain as Berenstain. Even if you watch the TV series that was made off of the Berenstain Bears. The way that they pronounce the last name is ambiguous at best. And as a result of this, when people are listening to this pronunciation, the mind naturally attributes a different spelling that never actually existed. History is also always rewritten by the victor. This means that there are so many thousands, if not millions, of things throughout history that have actually happened. But because they were rewritten in history, you're basically being gaslit into thinking it never occurred. And in today's world of government cover-ups and media payoffs and lobbying, this has only gotten worse instead of better. Perhaps the most esoteric cause, that's the one you guys are really interested in, right? The idea of parallel realities relative to the Mandela Effect. Perhaps the most interesting case that I can explain to you relative to this more esoteric explanation about the Mandela Effect is the death of Martin Luther King. The universe is a multiverse. And within that multiverse is parallel realities and also timelines. Not just timelines, there are places within this universe that time doesn't even exist. It is a construct of a specific reality. Our brain is designed to perceive one of these dimensions and to focus and construct reality in a linear way. But even though this is the case, consciousness itself is far beyond the brain. It is better to think of the brain as a translation device for consciousness itself, not the creator of consciousness. Because of this, even though we are designed to focus in one dimension, that doesn't mean that we cannot perceive beyond this dimension. It doesn't mean that we can't expand wide enough to take in multiple timelines. It doesn't mean for sure that this is all that exists. When it comes to the more esoteric explanations, the primary culprit in this Mandela Effect is actually the human being's capacity to perceive life path potentials. If you guys are interested in learning more about life path potentials, you can watch my video titled The Future. What people are perceiving, or what's happening with the Mandela Effect relative to Martin Luther King's death, is that people are perceiving his most dominant life path potential. Martin Luther King, even before coming into this life, always planned on assassination. Every one of his life path potentials ended in assassination. The variability is in how it happened. His most dominant life path potential is the one that most people inaccurately remember. He was in a crowd, there's people around, he shot at close range with a gun, a handgun specifically, and shot by a woman who happens to be black. What's interesting is he came so close to actually, let's call it manifesting this life path potential, that the woman who would have killed him actually did manage to stab him through the chest with a letter opener. However, that day, because of what happened in his consciousness previous to that day, she did not discharge the gun she was also carrying, which would have been the murder weapon. However, most of you would like to know why he derailed off of this plan. He derailed off of this plan because over the course of his life he became so aware of the corruption in government relative to civil rights that he would rather have a way of exiting or a way of exhibiting the corruption within the federal government. This desire to exhibit the corruption in the federal government caused him not only to sway off the path of his most dominant life path potential, but also his second most likely life path potential, which would have been him sitting at home in the living room and a grenade thrown through the window by several white men. Also didn't happen. I'm going to let you guys draw some conclusions about why he went for the specific death that he went for, given that his intention was to exhibit government corruption. Sadly, however, this didn't happen. All of the focus that was supposed to be placed on the government corruption relative to civil rights and how the government was after him actually just got derailed and focused on another man, James Earl Ray. Even though most people are unconscious of choosing into life path potentials because it is something that happens in large part because of determinism, it's a subconscious process in the majority of people, from universal perspective there is much choice that is going into why you die one way or another. So with the understanding that there is a lot more subconscious choice going into the matter, perhaps the best way for you to comprehend of this concept is to watch a movie called Sliding Doors. Memory is both fallible and infallible because perception is. You will experience conflicts between your memory and the reality you live in. In a universe that is a multiverse with multiple dimensions and therefore parallel realities where time and space is only a construct of some of those realities, it would take several books to explore the tip of the iceberg of the ways that this reality of the universe can affect the rather limited and linear time-space perception of a physical human. In other words, the bleed-throughs, glitches, and paranormal activity that can occur. When you desire to ponder the concept of parallel universe and parallel realities, I just want you to have one thing in mind. This universe, which is focused on expansion, has no interest in redundancy, which is the reason it doesn't tend to make copies of one thing. That being said, one thing can be very multidimensional in its nature. As scary as it is, perception is a lot more complicated than we would like, for the sake of our stability, to believe. Have a good week.